Hello everybody, Tate Davis here with another album review for you and sort of an album opening for you. This is my newly purchased reissue, I believe it was reissued by Rhino Entertainment, of the Velvet Underground's Loaded album. It came out in 1970. It was the Velvet Underground's last album with Lou Reed. He would depart the band shortly before the release of this album, over one, being tired of the Velvet Underground catalog not selling very well, and there was some over a mixing issue with Sweet Jane. There was a section of Sweet Jane that originally had that was later restored on the most recent reissue of it, called on the fully loaded reissue of this album, where the Heavenly Wine and Roses part of Sweet Jane was originally edited out to make it shorter and more commercial. And Lou was not a fan of that, and after a series of shows at Max's Kansas City that were recorded by a fan, later released by Atlantic Records subsidiary called Cotillion Records, as a live album in 1972. I think it was released by then. Anyway, those last performances with Lou Reed at Max's Kansas City in 1970 were later released as a live album called Live at Max's Kansas City. So, why don't I, as I'm unsealing the plastic wrapping here, how about I give you a little context on the background of this album? So by 1970, okay, well, first off, I should go back a bit. So by 1969, John Cale, who was the bass player for the Velvet Underground, is asked to leave the band by Lou Reed. Now, for what reason, I don't know. I think they wanted to go into a more commercial direction, and because obviously those first two albums did not sell at all when they were first released. I'm talking about the Velvet Underground and Nico and White Light, White Heat. So John Cale gets booted out by Lou Reed, and then as his replacement, in comes a guy who I think is probably one of the most underrated musicians in the rock and roll genre, a guy named Doug Yule. Had been in some previous bands before, but not to any degree of success. And John Cale, as I said, was the bass player, so Doug Yule was brought in to replace him on bass, but he could also play guitar, he could play piano, he could play drums, he could sing. A very talented multi-instrumentalist, and I think, in my opinion, a very good fit for the Velvet Underground. A very different kind of musician than John Cale. John Cale was also a multi-instrumentalist. He played cello, he played piano, he played bass, and a wide variety of string instruments. And those first two albums, John Cale was really responsible for the sound of those first two albums, to an extent. But with Doug Yule, you get something very different. So they released the self-titled Velvet Underground album in 1969. Doesn't sell diddly squat. Mike Curb, who becomes president of MGM Records, the record label which they were signed to, and made a decree that the label was going to cut all the acts on its roster that he thought had a strong connection to drugs, or that would cause them to get their songs not played by radio because of the drug references or whatever. Any band associated with drug culture. So that included the Velvet Underground, that included Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, that included Eric Burdon and the Animals. Those were the big three. So Velvet Underground get cut loose by MGM, and their manager manages to get them a deal with a subsidiary of Atlantic Records, a 2-album deal, recording contract with a subsidiary, like I said, a subsidiary of Atlantic Records called Cotillion. Cotillion. Yeah, Cotillion. However the hell you pronounce it. Cotillion. We'll call it Cotillion Records. So they decide with this next album that this entire next album is going to be loaded with commercial songs. Hence the name. Doug Yule was actually the guy that came up with Loaded. So they go to Atlantic Recording Studio in New York, New York. I got this from the liner notes here. And they cut this album. So who do we have on the lineup here? So the lineup. Oh, I should actually mention. So Mo Tucker, or Maureen Tucker, who is the longtime drummer for the Velvet Underground, is credited on this album by playing drums. She didn't actually play any drums. She was pregnant with her child at the time and wasn't able to show up or really play any shows with the band during this time. But she is credited on here. She would return to the band later, but instead they had Doug Yule's brother, Billy Yule, who was 16 at the time, played drums. They had a session drummer named Tommy, how do you pronounce his name? Casalero? I'm not really sure how you pronounce the name. Tommy somebody. Doug Yule played most of the drums on this album, and then their sound engineer, Adrian Barber, played drums on this album. He played drums on one song. So the lineup, you got Doug Yule on organ, piano, bass, drums, lead guitar, acoustic guitar, vocals, lyrics, and song composition. Sterling Morrison, lead and rhythm guitars and song composition. Lou Reed on rhythm guitar, piano, vocals, lyrics, and song composition. And then Mo Tucker, who is credited on drums but didn't appear on this album. Then you have percussion assistance by Tommy, Billy Yule, and Adrian Barber. Adrian Barber, like I said, was one of the recording engineers on this album. The Velvet Underground, which is to thank Jeffrey Haslam for his help in putting this album together. I believe he co-produced this album with Shel Kagan, and the various members of the Velvet Underground. So this is the front cover. This is the back cover right here. You can see a picture of the situation at Atlantic Recording Studio. There's the side 1 and side 2. So very kind of minimalistic, reissue here. I believe, I'm not sure when this reissue came out. It came out recently, but let me figure out how to put this back in the sleeve real quick. Sorry, folks. I swear I know what I'm doing. Get in there! Okay. So why don't I stop yapping about the history and start talking about the actual song? So, on side 1, track 1, we have Who Loves the Sun? Yeah, Who Loves the Sun. Very poppy Beatlesque tune. If this was released as a single, it probably could have been a radio, it could have been a chart hit for the group, but I don't believe this was ever released as a single. But yeah, good poppy 60s Beatlesque Lovin' Spoonful kind of tune. Good harmony vocals by I believe Lou Reed and Doug Yule sing lead on the song. Yeah, good song. Love the Sun. Number 2, side 1, track 2. We have Sweet Jane. Sweet Jane! Okay, yeah, Sweet Jane. This is the edited version of Sweet Jane. The full version of Sweet Jane, I believe, is about 4 minutes. This version on the vinyl album omits the Heavenly Wine and Roses part. Yeah, a great song, a classic. A number of bands have covered this song. The Velvet Underground original version is not my favorite. For those of you Lou Reed solo career fans, if you have not bought the album, the Lou Reed live album, Rock and Roll Animal, I believe from 1974, he does a very good version of Sweet Jane with like a jammy intro with Dick Wagner and Steve Hunter playing, trading all sorts of solos on it. It's awesome. Anyway, Rock and Roll Animal, Lou Reed. For those of you Lou Reed fans and Velvet Underground fans, if you have not checked out that album, that's the opener. The version of Sweet Jane is an opener. They do a version of Rock and Roll on there too, which is really good, which we'll be getting to in this album in a minute. But anyway, quick tangent aside, Lou Reed, Rock and Roll Animal, one of the greatest live albums of all time. Anyway, but no, my personal favorite studio version of Sweet Jane would probably have to be Mount the Hoople's version off of the All the Young Dudes album. Mount the Hoople, I think, did an excellent version of the song. Bronzeville Station did a really good version of the song. Lone Justice did a really good version of the song with a live version of the song with Bono guesting on vocals on I think it was one of the bonus tracks that came off of their first album. But no, Sweet Jane, a classic. Sweet Jane, Jack's in a corset, Jane's in a vest, and protagonist is in a rock and roll band. Anyway, Sweet Jane. Classic. Number 3, side 1, track 3, Rock and Roll. Another song that is done very well on the Lou Reed Rock and Roll Animal live album from 1974. Great soloing by Dick Wagner and Steve Hunter in that version. But the version on here is excellent. Doug Yule plays drums and plays all the guitar solos, I believe, on the song, and I think he does an incredible job of it. Doug Yule is a very good drummer, I should mention. I don't know who played. I forget exactly who played drums on what song, but I do know for certain that Doug Yule plays drums on Sweet Jane and Rock and Roll. I think Billy Yule might play drums on Who Loves the Sun. But Rock and Roll, yeah, great guitar soloing by Doug Yule. Lou Reed at his finest with his vocal performance. Yeah, done very well by the Runaways on their debut album and Live in Japan. Kind of a different feel there, but no, Rock and Roll, classic. Side 1, track 4, Cool It Down. Cool It Down's a good tune. Again, kind of in the vein of this album. It's kind of poppy, kind of Beatlesque in some places, but no, I like Cool It Down quite a bit. Side 1, track 5, closing out side 1, we have New Age, and I believe this is this is solely composed by Doug Yule. And I believe he also plays drums on it, and he sings it as well. New Age is great. It's a ballad. It's the beginning of a new age. Yeah. It's great. Kind of really takes you in when you listen to it. Great way to close out side 1. So, moving on to side 2, flipping the vinyl over, we have side 2, track 1, Head Held High. Try saying that 10 times fast. Yeah, good song. Not really much to say about it, other than it's kind of in the vein of kind of Beatlesque. A lot of Beatles songs on here, but no, it's a good tune. Side 2, track 2, a very fun song, Lonesome Cowboy Bill. Lonesome Cowboy Bill, Lonesome Cowboy Bill. I do know for a fact that Billy Yule plays drums on this song. Again, very poppy, very repetitive, Beatlesque. Maybe it had some influence from the continuing story of Bungalow Bill. I believe Doug Yule and Lou Reed both sing on this song. Yeah, Lonesome Cowboy Bill became a live staple for the band actually during those couple nights at Max's Kansas City and on the performances to support this album. Side 2, track 3, I Found a Reason. I Found a Reason might be one of my favorite songs on this album. It's in 6/8. It kind of gives you a break from all the 4/4 poppy, Beatlesque goodness that's on this album. It's a beautiful song. It's slow. It's moody. Great drumming by... Maybe it's Tommy playing... I'm not sure who plays drums on this one, but great song nonetheless. Probably one of my favorites on the album. Side 2, track 4, probably my least favorite song on the album, Train Round the Bend. It's a Lou Reed. I think Lou Reed might... Let me check. I'm going to check, because it's got... Oh no, it doesn't have the writing credits on the disc here. Okay. I know Lou Reed sings it. I'm not sure if he wrote it or not, but Train Round the Bend's pretty cool. Again, poppy, commercial. Could have been a radio. Every song on this album probably could have been a chart hit if they were released as singles. I don't know if there were any singles released from this album. I might be wrong. I'm not as much of a Velvet Underground expert as I am. I'm not. Well, I can't really consider myself an expert, but I don't know as much about the Velvet Underground as I do about other bands that I enjoy. So yeah, Train Around the Bend's cool. Side 2, track 5, the Magnum Opus on this album. In my opinion, the best song in this album. Billy Ewell plays drums on this song, I know for sure. Oh Sweet Nothing, and clocking in at 7.5 minutes. Yeah! The song's so good. Lou Reed, at his finest, singing on this song. Once again, I think this is Lou Reed singing on the song. And Doug Yule coming in with the harmonies and the chorus. Oh, sweet nothing, she ain't got nothing at all. You know, once you listen to that song, that chorus just plays on in your head for the next 2 hours. I adore this song. I love Oh Sweet Nothing. Really, what, in my opinion, probably the Velvet Underground's Magnum Opus. This was a sign. If you listen to the song, you know that shortly after the recording of the song, as with all the other songs on this album, that Lou Reed was on his way out, and that made a lot of Velvet Underground sad because a lot of people consider the follow-up to this album, Squeeze, to be a Doug Yule solo album, and a lot of Velvet Underground fans hate it so much. I don't. I love Squeeze. But anyway, Oh Sweet Nothing, my favorite song on the album. But anyway, so Lou Reed leaves after the residency at Max's Kansas City in 1970. This album gets released, doesn't go anywhere. They tour in support of it. Doug Yule moves up to sing lead vocals full time and play lead guitar, and he gets a guy named Walter Powers to come in and play bass. Eventually, in I believe 1971, Sterling Morrison is studying medieval literature at some college. I think it's the University of New York or New York University or something like that. Somewhere in New York, or in the Northeast area. He decides to quit the band to pursue a literature degree full time. Then, I believe, Doug Yule gets a guy named Willie Alexander to play keyboards instead of getting another guitar player. So at this point, the only original member left in the Velvet Underground at this point is Mo Tucker. Yeah, Mo Tucker also comes back around this time as well. So they tour some more. Their manager gets them. They're dropped by Coatilion Records, or however the hell you pronounce it. They decide to put out another album of live cuts as their second album in their second album deal in their 2-album recording contract. So they go. Their manager manages to get them in a 1-album deal with Polydor Records. So they go out to England, wanting to have full control of the product. Their manager sends all the other members home, so it's just Doug Yule, and Doug Yule's like, well, what the hell am I gonna do now? I owe Polydor Records an album. So he gets Ian Pace of Deep Purple to play drums on the album while he plays all the other instruments. The result in 1973 is Squeeze, the album which the UK band of the same name, who were popular in the late 70s, early 80s, would take their name from. Squeeze gets released, gets critically panned, it doesn't go anywhere. Doug Yule gets a backing band to play a set of dates in Europe, and when those don't go over too well, he calls it quits, and the Velvet Underground officially comes to an end. And then they reunite later in the early 90s as an opening act for U2. And Doug Yule, of course, is not asked to be in the reunion by Lou Reed. But anyway, in my opinion, I like Squeeze quite a bit. I might like it a little bit more than this, but I love the Velvet. If we're not counting Squeeze, this is my favorite Velvet Underground album. And of course, you could ask me tomorrow, and I could say that this is my favorite Velvet Underground album that Squeeze is. But I like Squeeze. I love Squeeze. I love this album. But Squeeze, by a hair, just gets the top position of my favorite. But Velvet Underground Loaded, certainly, in my opinion, the best Velvet Underground album from during the original run with Lou Reed. I like the self-titled Velvet Underground album quite a bit. White Light, White Heat, I like pretty good. And I know I'm gonna get crucified for saying this, and I'm sorry, but this is my opinion. I never liked the Velvet Underground or Nico that much. A few good tunes on it, but like weird songs like Venus and Furs and Heroin, which I never understood why anybody liked. Heroin is just no. Ugh. God, if I want to listen to a 7-minute Velvet Underground song, I'll listen to Oh Sweet Nothing, because at least Oh Sweet Nothing has beautiful harmonies, again, by Lou Reed and Doug Yule, but Heroin, ugh. And Nico, I find her voice pretty annoying. I mean, I'll Be Your Mirror is a good tune. All Tomorrow's Parties is a good tune. I'm Waiting for the Man's a good tune, but I don't know. I'm not strong on the Velvet Underground and Nico. Sorry. I know that's considered probably the greatest album of all time by a lot of rock fans, and that a lot of Velvet Underground fans hate Squeeze, which is my favorite Velvet Underground album. But anyway, that's a story for another day. But it's my review of Loaded. It is loaded with good songs, a great lineup. In my opinion, Doug Yule coming of age. I should also mention, Doug Yule, after he was done with the Velvet Underground, actually hooked up with some members of Poco and the Pure Prairie League in the late 70s, and formed a band called American Flyer, which released 2 albums, and which obviously didn't go anywhere, but a very good band. If you have not checked out American Flyer, it's got Doug Yule, the Velvet Underground in it, along with some guys from Pure Prairie League and Poco in it. So, but anyway, Velvet Underground Loaded, great album. And with that being said, thank you guys very much for watching, and hope you guys watch more stuff in the future, and we'll see you guys later. Bye bye.